piece, a masterpiece, if I may call it that, in your Substack column this week, which is long and detailed and worth reading, about who caused the Ukraine war. Many of the arguments in there you have made on this show. I'm deeply gratified for that, and elsewhere in the audience is familiar with many of those arguments. This is a detailed piece with a lot of history, and I commend it to everyone to read it. After you did all the research that you had to do in order to write this lengthy piece, is there any question in your mind but that the United States government is absolutely wrong when it says Putin wants to take over Ukraine, Putin wants to run Ukraine, and when he finishes taking over Ukraine, he wants to invade other countries in Eastern Europe? Is there any question in your mind?
There is no question in my mind. My good friend Steve Walt has advised me not to make the argument that there is no evidence to support the conventional wisdom which you just articulated about Ukraine. And I understand Steve's point, because what he's saying is you don't want to use extreme language and use words like no evidence. And he says you should say there's little evidence. My response to Steve is, I would say there is little evidence if there was any evidence, but there is no evidence to support the conventional wisdom. This is one big lie.
And the lie is being made or offered in order to generate political support for the people that are articulating the lie. The neocons in the State Department itself, the Secretary of State, the head of national security, and to the extent he knows what he's talking about, I don't want to get personal, the President of the United States.
I agree with that, but I'll take it a step further. I think it's very important to understand that this question of who is responsible for causing the Ukraine war matters enormously, because it is directly related to the question of who has blood on his hands. That's the issue here. In other words, is it Joe Biden and his lieutenants? Is it the West that has blood on its hands for causing this disaster? Or is it Vladimir Putin? And the reason that we invented this story that it was Putin and that he was interested in conquering Ukraine and making it part of a greater Russia, and then he was going to go into Eastern Europe and recreate the Soviet Empire. The reason we invented this story is that we want to make the argument he is responsible for the war and he has blood on his hands. So this is a really high stakes issue, and it's not going to go away, because what's going to happen here is that ultimately this war is going to end. People are going to understand it's a total disaster for Ukraine, which of course it is. And the question is then going to come front and center: who has blood on his hands? And is it Biden and company, or is it Putin and company?
It's Biden and company plus NATO plus the Western neocon mentality.
Yeah, it's the West more generally. That's
all
correct.
Right. Before we transfer over to Israel and Gaza